Welcome back, truth seekers. Tonight, I'm diving deep into some of the most shocking cases you've ever heard about. Stories so twisted and baffling that you'll think they come straight out of a Hollywood script. But here's the chilling part. Every single one of them is real. I've pored over old files, reports, interviews, and accounts to bring you these stories. And together, we'll break down the evidence, uncover the secrets, and ask that vital question: what really happened? Buckle up, because you are about to hear tales that will challenge your sense of justice, family, and fate itself. Case 1. The Stolen Life of Sharon Marshall. Our first investigation takes us back to the 1980s. On the outside, Sharon Marshall was the classic example of an all-American success story, intelligent, ambitious, and with dreams of working for NASA. She had a full scholarship to Georgia Tech, boundless opportunities, and friends who admired her for her kind heart. But beneath this picture-perfect reality, Sharon carried secrets. She gave up a baby for adoption as a teenager, attempted to run away with her high school sweetheart, and soon her life became entangled with one man, a man who would prove to be her undoing. That man was Franklin Delano Floyd, a drifter, a convicted felon, a man with aliases too numerous to track. Sharon moved with him to Florida, and from the very start, their relationship raised eyebrows. Was he her father figure, her partner, or something else entirely? No one ever seemed to know for sure. What followed was a descent into a nightmare of manipulation, abuse, and death. Sharon gave birth to a son, Michael, and tried desperately to support him. Friends noticed her vibrant personality, yet always lurking in the shadows was Frank, antisocial, aggressive, and controlling. When Sharon began plotting to escape, tragedy struck. She was found unconscious on the side of a highway, supposedly the victim of a hit and run. But doctors noticed troubling things: strange bruises, injuries inconsistent with a simple accident. 5 days later, she was gone. But Sharon's story didn't end there. Her death unleashed a flood of revelations. Frank's long history of violent crime surfaced. He had kidnapped children before, and when investigators dug deeper into Sharon's identity, they were stunned. Sharon Marshall wasn't even her real name. She was actually Suzanne Sevakis, a child kidnapped by Frank years earlier after he married her mother. Frank had stolen Suzanne and raised her as his own, disguising her under several aliases, only to eventually sexually abuse, marry, and arguably murder her. The story grows darker. Frank later kidnapped little Michael from school at gunpoint and confessed decades later that he executed the boy in cold blood. His reasoning? He didn't want the state to take Michael away. Frank Floyd sits on death row today, but the unanswered questions linger. Did he directly cause Suzanne's death? Why did it take decades to unravel the truth about her stolen identity? And how many lives were really destroyed by his violence? As an investigator looking at this case, one thing is clear. Frank's need for control defined him. He took children, manipulated identities, murdered, and destroyed families. Suzanne's life represents not just tragedy, but the horrifying truth that predators can weave lies so convincing they last for decades. But Suzanne's story isn't the only one with twists too bizarre to believe. Case 2. The Murder of Gregory Villemin, France's Endless Mystery. 1980s France. A picture-perfect countryside family, the Villemins, living quietly in L'Affaire. That peace shattered the moment they started receiving anonymous, venomous letters. Letters handwritten in jagged scrawl, promising revenge. "We'll get you, boss," one note read. "Your success will cost you." The threats escalated for years until one October day in 1984, their 4-year-old son Gregory vanished. Hours later, a call came in. "I've kidnapped the boy. I've strangled him and thrown him in the river." Chillingly, the caller was telling the truth. Gregory's tiny body was found drowned, bound, and left to drift in the cold waters of the Villemin. What followed was one of the most infamous investigations in French history, dubbed L'Affaire de Gregory. A nation watched in horror as suspicion turned inward onto family members themselves. Handwriting experts pointed fingers, accusing Gregory's own mother, Christine, of writing the threatening notes. She was jailed, only to be freed when the evidence crumbled under scrutiny. Meanwhile, Gregory's father, Jean-Marie, openly swore revenge against a cousin he believed guilty and carried it out in broad daylight, shooting the man dead. Decades passed. Evidence was re-examined with DNA, with stylometrics, with new technology. Dozens of family members interrogated. Prosecutors flipped theories, accusing one, then another, but never enough proof to convict anyone. As of today, Gregory's murderer has never been conclusively identified. Theories suggest jealousy in the Villemin family, resentment of Jean-Marie's rising status and wealth in the small community. Others believe the so-called Crow, the writer of the hateful letters, is someone still hiding in plain sight. For investigators, this case is a haunting study in how personal grudges, small-town suspicion, and flawed forensics can leave a case unsolved for decades. Yet, with new technology, like modern stylometrics, perhaps the identity of the Crow will still come to light. Case 3. Nicholas Barclay and the Chameleon. Our final case tonight is perhaps the most surreal and reveals the terrifying possibility that sometimes families may prefer a lie to the truth. Nicholas Barclay, a 13-year-old boy from Texas, vanished in 1994 on his walk home. Troubled, rebellious, with a court hearing looming over him, many assumed he had simply run away. Months passed, then years. Hope faded. Until suddenly, 3 years later, Nicholas turned up, in Spain, or so it seemed. Authorities told the family he'd been kidnapped by a human trafficking ring, forced to speak French, and brutalized. His sister flew to Spain to identify him and brought him home. But something was off. Nicholas, once blonde-haired and blue-eyed, was now dark-haired and brown-eyed, his Texan accent replaced by a suspiciously thick French one. He gave awkward, vague answers, wore sunglasses and hats indoors, and avoided direct scrutiny. Still, the family embraced him. They welcomed him home, told reporters they had their son back. For months, they carried on as if nothing was strange, until investigators pulled the thread. Fingerprints exposed the truth. Nicholas was actually Frédéric Bourdin, a 23-year-old French con artist with a record of impersonations across Europe. Known as the Chameleon, Bourdin had taken hundreds of false identities before, but this was his boldest scheme yet. Why did the Barclays accept the imposter so easily? Why ignore the glaring discrepancies? Here lies the final twist. Bourdin himself suggested the Barclay family accepted him because they were hiding something, that Nicholas was dead, murdered possibly by his older brother Jason, and the family preferred Bourdin's story to facing suspicion. They may have seen him as their cover story, their way to close the painful chapter. Jason, the brother who insisted Nicholas never came home, died of an overdose before he could be investigated further. Nicholas was never found. Bourdin served time, then continued with his schemes abroad. This case forces us to ask, when families accept an obvious lie, what truth are they running from? 3 cases, 3 families torn apart by deception, hatred, and violence. In America, a young girl stolen from her mother lived and died under false identities, trapped in the clutches of a predator. In France, a child's murder exposed the darkest rivalries inside a family, yet the killer still walks free. And in Texas, a missing child's place was filled by a fraud, leaving suspicions that the family may have known their boy would never return. As an investigative reporter, reviewing these cases leaves me with one clear impression. Truth is often stranger and more horrifying than fiction. Each of these stories holds layers of unanswered questions that linger like shadows. And maybe that's why we tell them, so they are not forgotten, so justice might one day be found. What do you think? Was Sharon Marshall's death truly covered up by Frank Floyd? Who was the crow haunting the Villemin family? And most chillingly, what really happened to Nicholas Barclay? Drop your theories in the comments because your insight might spot details others have missed. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and keep searching for the truth.